again inviting anyone for public comment. Hi.
Good afternoon. My name's Scott White, and I'm with PG&E, project manager for a project we were supposed to start in the last year. I've come to, we brought a director of our engineering department out here to bring you guys some good news. We don't have to tear up your streets. This is Terry White. And, I'd like to have him give you an explanation as to why we're not tearing up the streets.
Hi, good evening. My name is Terry White. I'm a director in PG&E's Gas Operations Department in the Integrity Management Group. Was asked to come here and describe the analysis that was performed that allowed us to conclude that the pipeline doesn't have to be replaced. It would probably take about 5 minutes to step through it if that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. So just a little bit of history. The morning of December 20th, 2011, a 330-ton crane traveled about 475 feet across one of our transmission pipelines, line 105A. This pipeline operates in Hollis Street between Powell Street and 59th Street. So 330 tons is just a massive piece of equipment. This pipeline's not designed to carry that type of weight or load on top of it. And so that same day, one of our pipeline engineers, one of the engineers that reports to me, performed a calculation using data that's available at that time. That calculation concluded that the pipeline very possibly was overstressed. A little bit of history on that pipeline. It is 1961 construction, 30-inch diameter steel pipeline. It was strength tested during the initial construction, 1961. It was again strength tested in 2011. So it's one of the pipelines that we have a fair amount of data and information on. Following that calculation, PG&E that day reduced pressure on that pipeline. So it normally operates at a maximum pressure of 198 pounds. The day of the discovery of the crane on the pipeline, it was operating at 135. Our practice is a 10% reduction from the discovery pressure, so that brought it down to 121 pounds. Following that, let me back up a step. When we reduce pressure on pipelines, that creates a challenge for us to provide gas service to our customers. The amount of flow we can put through a pipeline is proportional to how much gas is in there, what pressure it's operating at. On a cold day, especially in this area, what we call the Bay Area Loop, we need as much capacity on our pipelines as we can get. So this pressure reduction is actually a concern for us and can cause us to have to restrict some of our larger customers. Following that pressure reduction, we started a project to replace the pipeline. I think Scott has come in front of you 3 times, if I understand correctly. Through that effort and through some other information, it looked like an analysis could be performed on this pipeline based on some data that came available to us. That's called a fitness for service analysis. So we started that analysis. What a fitness for service does is roughly evaluates 3 things. It performs non-destructive examination. So that is X-ray and what's called magnetic particle testing that looks for cracks or flaws in the longitudinal weld, the long seam, as well as what's called the girth weld, where you mate 2 sections of pipe together. We had 3 excavations where we did those non-destructive examinations. We also were able to take soil data at those excavation sites, which then we could apply back to that initial calculation where we had to make assumptions on what the load-bearing capacity of that soil was. The second thing we did was a thorough records review, so all operating records, all maintenance records, all construction records, to look for any flaws that could exist on that section of pipeline that would then cause us to think that the recalculation of stress on that pipeline would not be appropriate. Those records reviews didn't reveal any flaws or any anomalies that would cause us to have concern on that. And then the third thing that is done is we recalculate that stress based on all that information. So the recalculation concluded that the stress was actually below the stress that would have deformed the pipe. One thing I failed to say, on the non-destructive examination, another test that was done was a check for ovality, how round or how not round has it become. So the concerns, if that much weight is on the pipeline, is that it can deform the pipeline or it can crack the pipeline. So the calculations were performed, the analysis was completed. It follows kind of an industry standard that is heavily used in other industries, and it's newly applied to this industry. So this is one of our, we've been using this analysis for about a year now. And so we concluded that it is safe to operate this pipeline back to that maximum allowable operating pressure, and that we don't need to replace that section of pipe. That's not an analysis, or that's not a conclusion that we do lightly. That's done with a fair amount of diligence and prudence. It was peer reviewed within my department as well as another department. One of what we call a chief engineer did a peer review on it and had to sign off that the analysis was complete and thorough and accurate. So with that, maybe I'll just close with the conclusion, this quote unquote from the report. The fitness for service assessment verified the pipe was not damaged by the crane loading, and no remediation such as replacement or in-service monitoring will be necessary.
So have you already increased the flow and pressure?
We have not. We probably won't until second to third quarter of this year. So there's, in that section of pressure reduction, there are some other locations that we want to address. We will do that before the cold weather season comes, and we'll return it. It'll be transparent to you when we do that.
Jack, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Nora.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a 55-year-old pipe in a very toxic parcel of land.
Right.
What would, if that pipe ruptures, would we have a similar situation to what you had down the peninsula in terms of fireball?
Well, no. I think there's a couple answers to that. So one answer is these pipelines now have isolation valves more closely spaced, so the amount of gas that would feed that fire is less and of a shorter duration.
These are automatic valves?
Yes, ma'am. Some are automatic, some are remote controlled valves.
Are there automatic valves on Hollis Street?
I can't answer that.
We'd like to know that, have that answer.
Second thing that I think is more informative is that section of pipe has been pressure tested twice, once during their initial construction and once 4 years ago. That is the gold standard to evaluate the health and the integrity of a pipeline.
And I just have one other question. Have you had to reduce service to any of those businesses along Hollis Street? Because we did have complaints 2 or 3 years ago about service being cut off, service being diminished. What kind of service are they getting now?
Not to my knowledge.
No problems?
No problems now. During that time, I would imagine we were doing the hydro test on it. Where we might
Could you speak in the microphone, please, Mr. White? Thank you.
We were doing a ILI hydro test on it, and I
So it
believe
would have been construction driven?
it would have been construction driven just for that sporadic time.
It was not associated with
Not
the problem of
associated
the
with
weight?
the actual flow, because that's the main artery that feeds the loop area.
So just to refresh my memory, how long was all this work going to take, ripping up Hollis Street for that pipe?
Well, last time I talked to you, I believe it was about almost 3 months, start to finish.
Okay. Well,
And it was previously through the Christmas season, so
Well, thank you for coming back, and I hope everything you say is God's honest truth.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Any questions, Jennifer?
Can you remind us and the public of what work you have been doing on Hollis Street in order to do this testing or other work as well? Or has it all been?
It's been a progressive of work of, they call it an ILI, internal
Inline inspection.
inline inspections. We hydro test it, fill it with water, we pressure test it, we pull it out, we certify it. I believe we run a pig through it not too long ago.
So the construction that was performed to feed this study was 3 excavations or 3 places where we dug up the pipe, took the measurements I described earlier. Yes, sir. Should I repeat that?
Yes.
Okay. The construction that was performed to support this study were 3 excavations, so
Talk
3
into the
places
microphone.
where we cut concrete, removed soil, exposed the pipeline, and then took measurements on the pipeline, on the welds as well as the ovality of the pipeline.
Other questions from council?
I have a question for staff, perhaps. Can anyone explain about that 330-ton crane on Hollis and how we can avoid something like that?
Oh, you definitely scrutinize that a little more closely now, but that was a part of when the development was underway at Emeryville Station. They were using that crane to erect the steel and I believe some of the facades improvements that went on that building. And they sought an encroachment permit for the whole project, and as part of that, they brought the crane out, and we didn't really coordinate with PG&E to let them take a look at that.
So in the future, I don't know how we
a
avoid
process
that.
now would, if they were to bring out any cranes or any cranes at all, we're looking to see where the loading is and to make sure that it's not going to be above any critical utilities so that we can avoid something like that in the future.
A routine request we get from cities and construction companies is we're going to bring this side load on top of your pipeline, and then we perform the calculation to understand if that exceeds or is an acceptable load to put on top of the pipeline.
So we've had several requests since then. The construction on 64th and Christie, they were going to bring a crane out on Christie Avenue, and at that, they were going to be putting loading on our sewer and storm drain in the area, and there were also joint trenches. They turned out putting the crane on site, so they didn't have to use the public right of way. So we're trying to work in that way to avoid it.
Yes. Anyone else?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, it's just kind of a cautious relief, but it's, uncertainty. I'm not an expert on this. So again, as I think Nora said, we trust your words. And of course, if something were to come about, where the liability stands, where the responsibility lands.
Responsibility for that pipeline is solely ours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I owe
See you again.
a follow-up on where we have the closest automated valve, and I'll also feed remote operated valves to that section of pipeline.
If you could give that information to the city engineer,
Yes,
be
ma'am.
very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.